This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Abayim. This is our 4th annual trip up north. It started actually 5 years ago on a solo run. And since then, the last 3 years we had a small bus. And Baruch Hashem, this year we basically tripled in size. So we thank everybody for joining us. We have many very dear Chaverim on the trip today. We have many special people. We'll try to introduce them. Davar Yafa Be'itai Matoiv. First, on the camera, I want to thank Rabbi Sal Orbach and his wife Raz for helping organize this trip. Sal was my first host in Eretz Yisroel when we started about 5 years ago. So we thank Rabbi Sal and his wife for their very hard work putting this trip together. Thank you very much. Rabbi Zev Tyberg, who also was from the founders of this annual visit. I had the zchus to be in Beit Shemesh many years, and Bezos Hashem, we thank Reb Zev and Reb Zev's father for joining us today. Thank you very much. We're going up the rows. Thank Reb Nassan Waldler for hosting me in past Israel visits. Thank you very much. And we have many special guests today. First of all, many members of my family. Many of them may admit that they're related to me. Some of them have not yet come out in the open to my father shaking his head no, that he will not reveal himself on this trip. But I want to welcome my father and mother. It's a great honor and zchus to have them on this trip. We hope they enjoy, and we wish them a bracha v'hatzlacha. And of course, my Eishes Chayos on this trip. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for everything. My sister and brother-in-law, our mechutanim, the chops are here. My nieces are in the back. I want to give a special shout out to Rebbitzin Yehudit Herman, who, well, she got a round of applause for organizing a number of shiurim tomorrow. Starting at 12 o'clock, there'll be a women's shiur, and tomorrow at 8:30, there'll be another shiur tomorrow evening for men and women. And I'm sure you may have seen the details, and there'll be a lot of other announcements and special notifications throughout the trip, so make sure you stay on top of the schedule. Okay, so here we are, we're going up north, and let's just speak a few moments about the purpose of our trip, what we're trying to accomplish. This is not just touring, this is not just sightseeing. I want to share with you a tshuva that is brought in the Sefer Torah Lishma. The Torah Lishma was written by an individual by the name of Rabbi Cheskel Kachli. Now, who's Rabbi Cheskel Kachli? Nobody ever heard of him. That's because he never existed. There was no such person. There never existed somebody by the name of Rabbi Cheskel Kachli. It is a pen name for the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai wrote a sefer, Shailas Tshuvas Torah Lishma, under the pen name Rabbi Cheskel Kachli. And the following question was raised. There was somebody who recently moved to the city of Tzfas, and he wanted to know, he spends his time learning, which of course is the greatest mitzvah, and the Talmud Torah K'neged Kol. He wanted to know, there was a place a few hours out of Tzfas where they had really luscious and delicious fruit, and he wanted to know whether it would be considered a waste of time from the mitzvah of Talmud Torah to visit this place to be able to enjoy the fruit, or perhaps it's not the right thing to do. Maybe it's a bittul Torah, maybe it's too indulgent. And he presented this question to Rabbi Cheskel Kachli. And Rabbi Cheskel Kachli offered the following very interesting approach to this dilemma. He quotes the Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin on Daf Lamed says that Rabbi Yochanan would take out his students to the Kinneret, and they would eat enormous amounts of the Peiros Genoisar, which are considered the most delicious of all the fruits. And the Gemara describes in length the amount of volume and weight that these fruits weighed, and how much Rabbi Yochanan personally ate of the fruits. And the Ben Ish Chai asked, why do we need to know how much food Rabbi Yochanan ate? Says the Ben Ish Chai, the Gemara is teaching us that if somebody goes out into the fields through the length and breadth of Eretz Yisrael, certainly Rabbi Yochanan and his Talmidim were not trying to just taste the fruits, but they were trying to show chavivos to Eretz Yisrael. And if somebody's intention in touring, in experiencing different parts of Eretz Yisrael is to show love for the land, then it's considered a very noble activity, so noble that one is even allowed to take off time from Limud HaTorah in order to experience and show chibuv Eretz Yisrael. And therefore the Ben Ish Chai says you could go out of Tzfas, spend an hour or two to eat the fruits, and this is considered a very noble activity. So this is the Be'ezus Hashem, hopefully, our kavanah today, to see many new cities that we haven't visited in the past. Some of the classics, of course, we're going back to Tzfas, to Tveria. But the main kavanah of the Nesiya Kedosha is to be able to show chavivos to Eretz Yisrael, which is an extremely noble activity. In fact, so noble, Rav Shlomo Zalman asks, does anybody know, the interesting halacha is somebody allowed to fly on an airplane in the 9 days? Is it permitted to travel in the 9 days? It's a very big shaila in halacha. Rav Shlomo Zalman paskin that one should not fly on an airplane in the 9 days. By the way, many poskim disagree. Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky says it's permitted to fly in the 9 days. We were in France this past summer, and we came back in the 9 days. But it's a machlokes. But says Rav Shlomo Zalman, to go to Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to fly in the 9 days. Because it's such a great mitzvah, not only to live in Eretz Yisrael, it's such a great mitzvah to visit Eretz Yisrael, that whatever danger may entail in flying is negated because of the mitzvah of visiting Eretz Yisrael. Ad kedei kach, it goes so far that one is allowed to fly on Tisha B'Av if they're visiting Eretz Yisrael. In fact, Rav Shlomo Zalman asks, what mitzvah is it to visit Eretz Yisrael? We know there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, but what mitzvah is it to visit Eretz Yisrael? So he quotes the Gemara in Ksubis that Kol HaHoylech Dalet Amos Eretz Yisrael Muftach Loi Shehu Ben Olam Haba. Merely walking 4 cubits in Eretz Yisrael, one is vouchsafed that they will have a share in the world to come. And Rav Shlomo Zalman would say over the following Chasam Sofer. So if you like Lamdus, after waking up early in the morning, this is the Chasam Sofer for you. Okay? Chasam Sofer asks the following contradiction. The Gemara tells us that if somebody sells an Eved, and he stipulates that the Eved could fulfill all the mitzvahs in the Torah except for Shabbos, it's a valid sale. On the other hand, the Gemara paskins that if somebody sells their Eved to Chutzar, to the diaspora, the Eved goes free, it's not a valid sale. So Chasam Sofer asks, what's the difference? You're allowed to sell an Eved even though he can't keep Shabbos. That means that you don't have to give the Eved the opportunity to fulfill all the mitzvahs. On the other hand, so then why can't you sell the Eved to leave Eretz Yisrael? Says the Chasam Sofer, because if you sell the Eved to leave Eretz Yisrael, you're basically taking away all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Because all mitzvahs are downgraded by performing them in Chutz Aretz, all mitzvahs are upgraded by fulfilling them in Eretz Yisrael. You know, the Gemara talks about the fallacy of people who learn on their own without a chavrusa or without a shir. The Gemara says, Cherev al habadim v'noyalu, a sword to those who learn on their own and they become foolish. The Gemara says one should not learn Torah on their own. It should always be with a chavrusa, with a chabura, with a shir, because by learning on their own, a person could make an error and maintain the error, and there's nobody to sort of check them. However, says Reb Chaim Falaji, says Reb Yaakov Emden, that only applies in Chutz Aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, you have Avira Da'ara Machgim, and the Gemara of Cherev El Abadim V'Noyalu does not apply. To the point where Reb Chaim Falaji, by the way, Reb Chaim Falaji wrote an entire sefer on Eretz Yisrael. It's called Artzois HaChaim. And there he writes, there's a klal in Shas, if there's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, Who do we paskin like? Just making sure that nobody's up. Okay. If you have a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, who do we paskin like? So the halacha is like by Shmuel Bedini, and by Rav Isur. By Rav by matters of Isur v'Heter, and by Shmuel by monetary law. What if you have a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan? Anybody know what's the rule? If you have a machlokes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, you paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. When? Always. Even though Rav Tanahu Upalik, and Rav came before Rabbi Yochanan. Excuse me, Rav came before Rabbi Yochanan, and yet we always paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. Why is that? Says Reb Chaim Falaji, because Rabbi Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisroel, and therefore Avira Da'ara Machgim, and we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. Now I'm going to tell you a little, okay, raise your hand, a little trivia question. Who here lives in Eretz Yisroel? Wow. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a basic difference between legality. What happened here? Okay. This might be dangerous to say, but okay. A basic rule, a difference in halacha between living in Eretz Yisrael and living in America. In America, there's something called Dina de Malchusa Dina. Like it or not, when the government makes a law, you must abide by it halachically. Why? Because does Dina de Malchusa Dina apply in Eretz Yisrael? Do you halachically have to follow the law? Now obviously, whatever I'm saying here does not reflect the opinion of the organizers of this tour, does not affect the opinion of Machon Magid Rakia, nor does this represent my personal opinion, of course, on camera. But what is the halacha? Does Dina de Malchusa Dina apply in Eretz Yisrael? Absolutely not. Why? Because the basis of Dina de Malchusa Dina is the government owns the land, and they give it to you on condition you follow the law. But in Eretz Yisrael, the people own the land. Eretz Yisrael is the natural birthright of Klal Yisrael, and therefore the halachos of Dina de Malchusa Dina do not apply based on the sefer I'm reading. Obviously, this is not my own personal opinion on the camera. Reb Chaim Falaji points out something else very interesting. Eretz Yisrael is completely surrounded by water. You have the Yarden, you have the Mediterranean Sea, you have Nahar Mitzrayim, wherever that is, and you have Nahar Pras. Okay, we're talking about big boundaries. Why is Eretz Yisrael surrounded by water? To indicate that anyone who comes to Eretz Yisrael must be metaher themselves. How? V'damim u'v'neshama. Before you come to Eretz Yisrael, you have to make sure you don't have any money in your possession that doesn't belong to you. You have to be tahar. By the way, tahar doesn't mean to go to the mikvah. Tahar means that you don't steal money from other people. Before you come into the Holy Land, says Reb Chaim Falaji, the fact that Eretz Yisrael is surrounded by water indicates that we have to purify ourselves before coming to Eretz Yisrael. Furthermore, he says, the halacha is in the morning. When you come to shul, when you get close to the shul, you're supposed to run to the shul. It's a halacha. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. You know Shulchan Aruch? The Jewish code of law. When you get near the shul, there's a halacha, you're supposed to run to the shul. Likewise, when you come near Eretz Yisrael, you're supposed to run to Eretz Yisrael. So let's say the plain lands. It doesn't say you should run anyone over, but you should run off the tarmac you should run to Eretz Yisrael. Now, what is the gematria of Eretz Yisrael? Anybody know? We have another hour and 30 minutes till you compute this.
8:32.
Very good, 8:32. Gematria Teislev. Teislev. Teislev means to pay attention to, which means Eretz Yisrael needs to occupy a person's mind at all times. Eretz Yisrael is the gematria Teislev. One should always think about Eretz Yisrael. Now, when one goes to Yerushalayim, there is a mitzvah of lina. You know what lina means? You got to sleep over the night. You're not. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, people would be oilei regel, and they would be required to spend the night in Yerushalayim. There's a mitzvah of lina. So let's explain a little bit about the importance of sleeping in Eretz Yisrael. And this will help put everybody to sleep, of course, if I have not been successful in doing that already. Why do we go to sleep? What is the purpose of sleep? Hashem should make us. We have Yemei Shenoiseinu Bohem Shivim Shana, then Begvurais Shmoinim Shana. So why spend half the time in a horizontal position? This is the question of the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, who, by the way, the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh came up to Eretz Yisrael in the last year and a half of his life, and he opened a little shul in the Old City. You say, we're in the Old City. Exactly. Go to TorahAnytime.com. We were there last night. You could watch all about the shul of the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh. Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh writes in Parshas Vayechi that a person's neshama consists of nitzotzos, different sparks. Each spark is a day of your life. Now, if a person does a mitzvah, that mitzvah, it becomes attached to the neshama, to the spark of that particular day. However, if a person does an avera, they're in danger of impugning the mitzvah they may have done that day. So what you want to do is, you want to make sure that if you had a good day, says Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, you want to go to sleep. Because when you go to sleep, you put the day in escrow, in a safe deposit box. So any sin that you may do afterwards will not affect the mitzvah that was performed that day once you went to sleep. So sleeping basically secures the mitzvah of the past day. Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh Parshas Vayechi. That may be the reason why there's a special mitzvah, dafka, to go to sleep in Yerushalayim. Because it's so meritorious to be in Yerushalayim, to breathe the air of Yerushalayim, to walk the streets of Yerushalayim, to be in the Shar Shamayim, that Hashem wants to ensure that we secure that mitzvah, so we immediately go to sleep. So, likewise, it's such a big mitzvah that you all came together to join this trip. So, if you go to sleep now, you'll be able to secure the great mitzvah of coming onto this bus, of hearing a few words of Divrei Torah, and this way, you could put it in a security, safe deposit, and it will remain la'olam va'ed. Okay, we'll be back with more in a bit.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.